per semester and not deal with all
Okay,
of
so what we're going to do today, I gave you guys some handouts of documents that came out of our last 2 sessions. And again, none of this stuff is set in stone. My whole purpose here is to try and help you guys be successful as a committee and feel confident in the the job, the task that you need to complete. So one of the first handouts that everybody should have a copy of is the notes from our last session. I think a lot of you guys were at this session, but some people were not. We went around and just brainstormed ideas for each of the 7 elements that are on that faculty evaluation, that faculty observation form that you guys have to fill out. And then after everybody brainstormed, we as a group sat down and thought, okay, well, what were the most important things that needed to be behaviors that needed to be seen in each of the 7 areas so that you could complete the form at the end. And the most important thing that the group decided on, or in some cases there are 2, is the starred one that's listed first. So for example, when we talked about how are we going to know the objectives for the class session were achieved, the most important thing the group came up with, the syllabus aligns with the lecture that was taught. And then below that, those bullet points are other ideas, other suggestions that the group came up with as other things that you could be looking for to find that evidence that the objectives for the class session were achieved. And again, the whole point of this is so that when you go into the class, you're actually looking for evidence that you can use to complete that form at the end. So for each of the 7 elements, there are 5 or 6 different behaviors or pieces of evidence that you could use to document whether or not that instructor was successful in each of the 7 areas. So that's just written down from what we discussed. The other thing that you guys should have received is just the draft checklist form. At our first meeting, some of the members had indicated that they wanted a form that they could use while they were in the actual observation that would be sort of a place that they could check stuff off and keep track of stuff and keep it organized in terms of what the different elements of the final form were. So what I did with this is adapted from a form that came from the University of Minnesota that the committee members seemed to think would be helpful. I just kind of consolidated and synthesized our notes from last time into specific elements that you can check or uncheck. The way University of Minnesota does it is the observed person, the instructor, goes through and does the observed column first and says, okay, for the objectives for the class session were achieved, I'm being observed, Jim, what I really want you to look for is objectives were presented at the beginning and summarized at the end. If I, as the observed instructor, want Jim to look for that, I would check it off in the observed column. And that's only if the instructor has specific things that they are maybe working on or trying to improve or want feedback on that could stay blank. You guys could decide we don't want that. This is a Word document. Melanie's posted it. You can take out whatever you want. You can add in whatever you want. And then the grade columns, the grayish, I guess I should say, are the ones that you will use as the observer. So for example, if I told Jim, hey, check and see if I presented my objectives at the beginning and summarized them at the end, and Jim sat and watched me and he's like, you did, but it wasn't very clear, he probably would check acceptable. And then in the evidence area, right, well, the objectives weren't really clear. They weren't written down anywhere, and you said them really quickly at the end, but some kids came in late, or give the feedback on why you rated me that way in that particular element. So under the expected behaviors for each element, again, I synthesized from the notes and something that was kind of measurable, quick, observable, chunk of behavior that you guys could be looking for. We may find after today, practicing with these videos, that that's not really helpful to you at all. We may need to completely go back to the drawing board, but this is what has come out so far from our discussions. Yes?
Should we be providing the person we're observing this then instead of the summary one, since this is more specifically rubric? So they make sure before we come in, they've seen what we're evaluating?
That's a good question. So I conceptualize this as sort of draft type stuff for you guys. But however, you as your committee, you guys are the ones that go do the observations. If you think it would be more helpful, I mean, we could just eliminate this top part and you could just use the, you know, the check boxes and the evidence boxes as a way to take notes. Or it could take a more formal, hey, this is what, you know, what specific behaviors I'm going to be looking for, and be shared directly with you. I think that's a, you know, for you and the committee to decide how you best see this being used.
Question, please. You said at the beginning that the observer will check mark here in the first column. Observer.
Yes.
So it means I have to give it to him in case we accept this way. I have to give it to the observer before I start observing his class or her class. And he or she are going to check what am I supposed to look at.
If you choose to do that. Like I said, this came from the University of Minnesota, and it's the one that people thought would be helpful. That's how they do it. I don't know if that's how you guys want to do
That's
it.
right. I mean, in case we accept it this way, I can go ahead and give it to the one who is going to be observed before class.
I would think you would do it at your pre-conference, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and that would again go to Melanie's question that, yeah, if you really want to use this form in its entirety like this, then yeah, definitely you would need to talk it over with the person, show it to them, say, are there any specific things you want me to look for on this list?
Other question. At the University of Minnesota, the observed and the observer are both from the same department.
Mm-hmm.
That's a question that must be answered. Because usually when I am from the same department, I can judge better than when I go and observe one from the arts department. That's the question. And that's what I have been used to at the University of Pittsburgh or Indiana University of Pennsylvania. Only the faculty from the same department has evaluated the past faculty only, not from other departments. That's why I'm asking.
And I can't address that because I don't know the procedures or the discussion behind how you assign. I could tell you the only thing that I took from the University of Minnesota was this structure. So all of the 7 elements are CSM. All of the behaviors are CSM.
Okay.
So
But I want only to see if a math faculty at the University of Minnesota is evaluating a biology instructor at the University of Minnesota. That's the question.
I think he has a good point, except the problem is we're not large enough to do that.
That's true, but I mean, there must be a kind of something close to it. Math, physics, maybe chemistry together, but not math and psychology or math and philosophy. That's what I'm asking about.
We did it for two reasons. The first overwhelming one is the logistics component is I'm trying to match up schedules, and we're a small committee of only 2 representatives from each division, required, trying to do 40 people. So just from a logistical standpoint, I've had to kind of branch out. But the other reason we did it originally was to do it for the observer, the one being observed, to have what they would perceive as most fair, because we put up that they could choose between in-house and out-of-house observers in case they felt like their department was targeting them, so that they had an alternative to their own group.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
I'm not against it, but I mean, somebody from the department must be the one who is going to observe or not. I mean, the name must be there.
Mm-hmm.
The one who is going to be observed can choose it or can say, no, I prefer to go with the other.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm saying. What do you think about it?
No, it totally makes sense to me, because me personally, I wouldn't want to observe somebody in English. But I don't have any trouble with physics, the sciences.
That's what I'm saying.
Well, I think in the past, Melanie has tried to keep things within the same department because that's ideal. But I think it's not always possible.
I agree with you. It's not always possible, but it must be the first priority.
And it is. When I put them together, I really do try to match them up. I try to match them up for convenience for us as well as what's best for the observer. So, like, I'm not sending Josh to Leonardtown, so I try to make it match by division and campus and schedule. And so that's my first priority, but that is often not. And then I have to go to my next tier down, which would be, okay, location probably trumps department.
Yeah, I agree. There's only one other full-time math teacher at Prince Frederick, so I'd much rather observe other disciplines than travel to other campuses.
That's fine, that's your choice, but I mean, the first choice might be to observe something from the sites.
And you can make that option to me because I do have stars for those. Like, so when Bonnie Harrison was with us, she said she was only comfortable doing the business department and not outside. So I put a star, and so that's one of her criteria. And I know Josh said specifically, I only want to do Prince Frederick. And so I have like criteria next to each person on what they are willing and not willing to do. So if you're uncomfortable outside of that type of thing, I can make that notation, and that's how I work them. So I do try to accommodate us as well, to not make you go to Kingdom Come and then look at ceramics in your math teacher. Try.
What, isn't there potential for repetition here? How often we do these peer assessments annually?
Well, I don't know the process.
G, every once every 5 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
All right, then that spreads it out.
And that's another thing is Group A gets priority because they're first years, and then the second priority is those who are up for promotion. So I make sure that their matches are better, I guess you could say, than I do with the Group Ds and stuff, because you're not up for promotion. I mean, so if your assessment's not as wonderful, it's not going to kill you. So I purposely choose those ones who are on the watch list, like the first years, which is the Group A's, and those who are up for promotion. So I make sure that their matches are done first.
That works.
While we're talking.
Yeah.
So we're talking about this particular form from Michigan, which is great.
Well, I want to correct that though. It's not, the only thing is the way that the checkboxes are actually formatted.
Let me ask one question. Whatever we do, it's going to be in the faculty handbook, right? Right now, there's that one in there that we already had.
Yeah, so the form, this is that form.
Right, but I'm saying, you know, we don't want to deviate from what's in the faculty handbook, because we don't want one evaluation going by one criteria and another one going by another criteria. That's my understanding of what we were doing, is that?
Yes, so we are using the one that's in the faculty handbook, with two exceptions that we have in ours. So there's an alternative form in the math division and one in the health division, because there are faculty members who only do like computer lab, and so our form doesn't match.
Right.
But besides those very few exception people who are getting evaluated, everybody's on the same form, whether adjunct or full-time.
That's fine. I just wanted to make sure, because I know it's a pain to get anything approved by the faculty. So
Yes.
it just takes like.
Yeah, so we are sticking with that.
Some through Congress than it is to get it through the faculty. Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, just making sure.
Yeah,
we're on
this
the
does
same
not
page.
replace that. This is just a note-taking method, which you can or cannot use. The checklist form, some people said they wanted a checklist. Other people may not want a checklist. I also think that we had a general enough discussion that the discipline may not matter as much, because it's just basic pedagogical practice that you're looking at. So when we had our discussion last time, we were looking at behaviors that you would see if it was a lab or if it was a lecture. The only place where it really doesn't work is online, obviously, but as Melanie said, you guys already have developed ways to cover that particular aspect. So this may not be helpful. That's why we're going to practice with it today on a few short videos and see if you think it's helpful. If it's not, then you don't have to use it. If you're like, it's okay, but we can fix it. We could do whatever would be helpful, so that when you actually go into the classroom, you're not filling out that final form usually. This is just a structure by which you can gather evidence to fill out that approved final form that, like you said, we're not gonna mess with. So hopefully this is aligned with what that form will require for you to officially do for the people that you observe. And then the last item that I gave you, if some of you guys were at the coordinators meeting and have already seen this from pre-semester, but this is another maybe simpler way to take notes while you are actually watching someone observe. The one problem with this more complicated format is that you might be flipping around. Like, oh, what is that? Wait, is that achieved objective? Is that materials? What page is that on? This one's pretty long. This is a relatively simple way to take notes in your evidence column of the things that you're observing, and then use the coding column to link it to the numbers that came from the form that you will fill out. So as you're just kind of scripting as much as you want to, using some like timestamps every once in a while, like when an activity changes or a topic changes or a question comes up, then you can go back and say, okay, this evidence here relates to method of presentation, and you can write a 2 in the code column. And then the evidence, or excuse me, the questions comments column is something that you can use to guide that post-conference. So if you saw something and you're like, I didn't really think that worked that well, then that might be, and again, this is just a note-taking method. This is not something that you would have to submit to anybody or hand over to anybody. But then at the post-conference, you could say, so while you were presenting that information, I noticed whatever. How did you think that went? And then that leads you to a dialogue or a discussion in the post-conference for the person to be able to reflect on what they did and why they did it. They may have had a great reason for doing it that way that you didn't realize, especially if it's a person who's out of your area. Or they might say, oh, I didn't even know that, I didn't notice that. And then that can lead to, hopefully, them thinking, well, maybe next time I'll do this instead, and lead to that professional growth. So I gave you 4 copies of this one just because it was much less to copy. The videos that we're watching today are really short, so I didn't feel like you needed to have multiple copies of the big full form. What I'd like you to do as we're going through the videos is to use this to start taking notes and practicing on these on the videos, and then we'll discuss and hopefully be able to come up with, as a committee, a final version of this that we all agree on. So that way, Melanie can post the videos that we watch in the shell, as well as the completed committee form, so that anybody who joins the committee can watch the video and then look at the form that you guys did and say whether or not how they agree, or so that they can understand the discussion or the deliberations that you use to come to your conclusions on this. And that's hopefully going to be a way for there to be some consistency. If you, as the existing experienced committee members, can say, yeah, we think this about that element, someone coming in knows the basis that the committee's working from. So any more questions? All right, so if you have a copy of just the simple note-taking template so that you can just jot, I mean, this doesn't need to be real formal, but just jot down some things so that when we discuss the more complicated form you have, that'll jog your memory for what it is that you saw and what you thought about it. So this first video is from a managerial accounting class. It's not the whole class. I didn't think we wanted to sit here for an hour and a half and watch one person's class for the entire time. This is about 15 minutes so that you can get an idea of how this particular professor used or approached this particular topic.
Do you want us to evaluate him as we watch this?
Yes, so pretend you are sitting as he's actually being observed. All right, let me pause this for a second. It's really hard to find community college professors with students in the classroom. There were a lot of teaching demos where they taught something and pretended there were students in front of them. So that most of these are people who are actually being observed themselves and evaluated themselves. So he has someone they all will have someone in their class who's doing the videotaping, but the fact that there are students in the classroom will give you an idea of how they interact with, because that's communication and student engagement are 2 of the elements on the forum. So what you will be doing now is pretending that you are observing Mr. Tony Wayne from JCCC in his managerial accounting class. Let me see if I can make this a little bit louder.
like my class.
means that.
The one thing I definitely got out of that is I will always carry a sandy wipe and wipe off the mouse in the class. I'll never use the
Yeah,
mouse.
right.
You know, oh, that was disgusting.
I heard that clicker.
So, but I thought that too. That's why it's, when you teach school, you do vampire
Yeah,
sneaks. So you don't, and I know in nursing, yeah, you don't touch anything with your hands. Your elbows are doing, you're using your feet, and you're not touching anything with your hands. So that was, but I think it's also pretty common, what you guys know probably better than me, that when you go to observe people, they can't help but comment to you while they're trying to do the teaching. They make reference to you, or they make like jokes responding to your presence in the classroom. So what I'd like to do, and hopefully you guys jotted down at least a few notes, I'd like to now see what you guys thought and how it might fit into the more formal form. So for example, the first one, the objectives for the class session were achieved. The most important thing the committee came up with last time as an expected behavior was that the lecture aligned with the syllabus.
But we don't know the syllabus, obviously, right?
That is true.
But I imagine the lesson was on budgeting,
Yeah, we don't know what the objectives were.
and he was kind of all over the place.
Okay. So, and again, if we're going to continue to use this as just your notes, then I think you can write whatever you want on there. But certainly when you go into the post-conference, that's where we're going to use our objective lesson. And that's you were all over the place, but how did you structure your organization for your lecture? Did you share with me what the framework was or something?
Do you feel that you were all over the place?
And a couple of times he did try to provide some structure. Did you see any evidence of that?
We had a PowerPoint.
We had PowerPoint.
So there was a PowerPoint.
He did reference it was quite important, or they were important slides.
Yeah.
Okay. What else did he do?
Tried to structure in real life examples.
What else did he seem to do to align the lecture with the syllabus or with the course framework? Well, he made a couple more comments as he was going through, especially Josh, something maybe rubbed you the wrong way about computation and pushing your pencil around. But why did it, what was he referring to? He was referring to a particular chapter. I think he said chapter 9 or I forget, I think it was chapter 9. Yeah, oh, you don't really need to know that. That's just computation stuff, and I don't care if you know that. So he was referring to elements of the course structure, but it wasn't really very clear. I mean, the point of that lesson, according to the description, was profit. Gosh, I can't think of the accounting term for it, but it had to do with predicting or projecting your profits for the year. Did he talk about profit at all?
Mm-hmm.
He told a lot of personal stories
Yeah.
that I don't know necessarily if, again, not being an accounting person, I don't know if they necessarily helped that, but he didn't really seem to use, and actually at one point when he put up a slide, what did he do? It was the slide about managerial responsibility, I think. I know you couldn't really
He
see
talked
that.
about the college that he was at and how he got his job.
Did that. But there was one slide when he said, well, this is in the book and it's in red, and they put these PowerPoints together, but he basically told the students, that's not how it is in the real world. This is how it is in the real world. Let me tell you my story of what I know. He got off target a little bit into talking about how he got his adjunct teaching job at another institution. You know, so he's trying to, in a certain way, make connections, but I'm not sure, you know, in terms of the lecture aligned with the syllabus, you guys will have a copy of the person's syllabus, or at least their outline. Will it be the whole syllabus, or at least the outline for that particular class? Do you guys get that before you go in?
Mhm.
You got the whole syllabus.
You get the whole syllabus? Okay. So it'll be more easy for you guys to tell that. Were objectives presented at the beginning and summarized at the end? And again, we didn't see the end, so maybe he did something. Did he use any form of assessment to measure understanding? No. So if you were going to rate him in this first area, would you check area of strength, acceptable, or area of improvement for the 3 expected behaviors? For all 3? Yeah. And again, it's hard to tell the syllabus one. I mean, he did seem like he was occasionally trying to provide that structure, but or certainly wasn't very clear, and he was jumping around a lot.
Needs to put a paragraph in there about tardy students.
Yeah, so I'd mark area of improvement for all 3.
Good. Did anybody think he did anything well under objectives for the classroom review? Do you have any positive feedback? And it is hard because, again, you didn't see his whole class, but we're just basing it on the snapshot that we do see. Number 2, the method of presentation was appropriate in meeting the objectives. The most important expected behavior that you guys wanted to see from an instructor was the methods that were used to engage the students.
The students were irrelevant in that. He didn't have any.
Well, he did refer to a couple of students by name.
Yeah.
By the
Assuming they
first-
weren't examples. I don't know if they were real people or.
Well, he looked at somebody.
Yeah.
It did seem like maybe they had some kind of project, or they had done some kind of proposal, and he was referring to something, you know, because he did say, you know, I forget the names too, but Brandon, you can only do this. So he does at least know their names. Did students do anything?
No, it's pure lecture.
Was there any evidence that students understood the material?
No.
Was a combination of strategies used?
No. I mean, there was lecture and a little bit of PowerPoint, so you might call that visual, but for the most part, it was lecture.
He had a cup of coffee.
Which I found was extremely distracting. Carrying that cup of coffee around.
Yeah, I got that.
I thought that was extremely distracting.
I mean, sometimes you have to have water and you gotta take a drink, but
Right, well, that's different though. He carried that cup.
yeah, that's what I mean.
Walking around the room, I'm like,
Take a drink and put it
drink
down.
coffee before class and get away from the cup.
And actually, did he even take a drink of it ever? He just kept picking it up every day. Maybe after he sneezed, he might have. So what do we think about the method of presentation? Do we say for it engaged the students? Is that a strength, acceptable, or area of improvement?
Improvement.
Students understand the material?
Improvement.
Yeah. We don't know, but at the very least, there was no opportunity for them to, and I don't know, again, this is the same as when you observe. You don't know what all the other classes in this course looked like, but nobody was raising their hand. Nobody said, wait, can you slow down? Nobody said, isn't that the same as, I mean, nobody said anything, so there was no evidence. Even if it was a great lecture, you still didn't have evidence that students were understanding.
Maybe they were using their cell phones.
There's one video, I don't know if I could find it again, where the camera's in the back, and I forget what the lady's teaching, I think intro to accounting, and the young man in the front row is looking at anime on his computer the entire time. It's like so obvious because you're behind. So yeah, you don't know what they were doing, if they were even listening. Based on the fact that he was rambling so much, they probably were just copying down the slides and ignoring what he was saying, because they figured, especially a couple times when he said, this slide's important, that was what they were focusing on. But again, copying down PowerPoints doesn't necessarily mean they understand. What would we give them on a combination of strategies?
Improvement.
Do you disagree? So area of improvement for strategies as well? Okay. Evidence of active learning exists. Any other comments or evidence you guys had in that particular area? The method of presentation was appropriate?
I'm the second one, we have that students understand material. I think that one's gonna be hard to observe in any classroom. Like, there might be evidence of, but I don't know that we can say, I don't know, we might wanna rephrase that one or something, because you know if they understand unless you're doing a.
Definitely understand is not one of Bloom's taxonomy observable, measurable behavior. So that is a good point.
One to say in any classroom.
And that, you know, again, now that we've had a chance to sort of review what we talked about last time, are the first and second behaviors basically the same thing? Are you really looking at engagement? Or do you also want to see evidence that the students were, you know, integrating or utilizing that material as well? I mean, we could just cross that one off.
Or maybe even like making connections with the material or something, rather than understand. I don't know, that seems so.
You know, understand is definitely not the best word there. So do you want to edit it, take it out? What do you guys think? Want to watch another video and see if it, well, it's never going to work because like you point out, it's not a measurable verb. It's not an action verb.
Understand what you know.
It fits with the last one, evidence of active learning. Because you can't prove until they're assessed whether they understand it, but you can see if they're actively trying to learn it.
It's true. So maybe just cross that one out. Okay. Yeah, because that's a great point, that the first and the last engage the students, active learning kind of get at, are more appropriate to method of presentation. Right. The other one is more appropriate to assessment.
What if you like ask a question that the students had to respond to? I mean, that would be evidence of active learning. If you come in my math class, I put things on the board, or here, you gotta work this one, or you think, okay. To me, you can judge active learning if the professor actually presents something that the students have to respond to. And in that case, he didn't present anything. So there really wasn't any evidence, but I wouldn't necessarily take that line item out.
Now that's not the one we're taking out. We're taking out students understand the material.
Oh, I thought we were talking about evidence of active learning.
Well, I understood this material. I mean, I did.
But was there evidence of it that you could observe that for those students?
Well, no.
Now, granted, we couldn't also see the students for the
we're
most
sort of
part.
restricted at this point, but I did understand what he was talking about.
I would just provide them with examples. So like, instead of sitting there and saying, well, this is how the college should budget, say, let's get in groups and come up with thoughts with regards to, okay, how do you think the college should look at a budget, jot down some notes, and then they can have a class discussion. And that way you're engaging.
Or at the very least, and going back to the idea of questioning, he used a lot of rhetorical questions where he would ask a question and he would immediately answer it. So even if a student said, oh yeah, you know, my dad's business, or, you know, where I work, they didn't even have a chance to do that because he would say something and never even give them a chance to get involved. So, yeah, even if you don't ever want to do group work in your class, there's still ways to get students involved rather than just keep telling and telling and telling and telling information. And he didn't seem to do anything but tell information in his method of presentation. Number 3, the instructor was well prepared for the class session. The most important element that came out of the last session was the instructor demonstrates both expertise and a plan for the session.
Yeah. So,
how do you know what?
I mean, he has expertise. He needs some work on his plan.
Yeah, he sounded knowledgeable, and he did use real life examples, but he could have been better prepared in other ways.
Yeah, he kind of rambled in my opinion.
Right.
Of course, I don't know anything about the subject, but for me, he just kind of rambled.
And it did, and sometimes he gave examples, but then even his example about college and university trying hiring practices, he started talking about, well, I was going to teach this class, last semester, and then it didn't get enough students, and then, and he just kept going on. And then I taught this class. So even though the examples did start out being, I think, relevant, and he was using something authentic, sometimes they went too far and deviated from, the original topic that he was supposedly discussing. But he obviously has practical, he's got a business, so he does have practical hands-on knowledge. So we think acceptable for the expertise in the plan. He did have a PowerPoint. I don't know, we couldn't see the whole thing, but he definitely did have a PowerPoint. I don't know if he made that or if that was one of the publisher PowerPoints, but he did have something that kind of provided a structure for the session. Whether or not he actually talked about it, it seemed like sometimes he wasn't. He'd put it up and then he'd talk about something different, but you want to give him acceptable on his expertise and plan? Anybody different?
I'll give it to him.
You're okay with that?
Yeah, he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, good things.
Adequate materials are provided. And this might be, actually, it's saying that we might need another column for like not applicable. Now, certainly it would be different if he said, here's a copy of the PowerPoint, oh, I don't have enough for everybody to share. Well, then that would be an issue with adequate materials. But if you don't hand things out or you don't use computers.
For example, I asked my students to bring out PowerPoints and bring them with them to class. Maybe he has done the same, like Arino.
Yeah.
That's the idea.
So there may need to be a not applicable one, because in that case, it wouldn't be your fault if a student didn't have it because they know what your policy is. So we might need a not applicable and column. So I would say adequate materials are provided. There probably wasn't evidence of that, but was it an issue?
No, we haven't seen anything.
Yeah.
And nobody objected that they don't have material.
Class session is well-paced, structured, and controlled.
Acceptable.
Yeah, his pacing was
You got
fine.
4 students wandering in late, that ain't controlled.
He said, your class doesn't.
They do it once.
Well, okay. Do you think he was acceptable in terms of?
He's acceptable.
Okay.
He could have locked the door.
Yeah, I've often wondered about it. Anybody ever do that?
My
I've
husband's
seen it done, I've never.
professors did that to him. 'Cause he
I give a
was late.
quiz the first 8 minutes of class, and if you come in 5 minutes late, you miss 5
You
minutes.
missed the quiz.
That has done it,
Yeah, that's another technique or strategy that's going to get them there on time.
I like that, like close the door and have crime scene tape on them.
Taser them when they come in.
Oh, I really enjoy that.
Can we all get trained in?
You will.
The last one that was deemed as an expected behavior was the instructor demonstrated the ability to respond to issues and challenges that arise.
He sneezed and then talked about it.
Well, that is actually a great point, because a challenge or an issue could be having someone else in your classroom observing you. Like, he didn't seem to deal with that particularly well. He didn't deal with his bodily functions very discreetly. But there weren't really, it's not like there was any evidence that kids were, the students were doing anything wrong or were disruptive or were talking back to them or anything, because students didn't really do anything at all.
But he never even addressed the fact that they just kept coming in.
That's a
Right
good
in,
point.
right in this
too.
lecture, that's a distraction
Yeah.
right there.
So did he demonstrate the ability to respond to issues and challenges?
I would say like non-applicable. There weren't any challenges that I saw.
Yeah, and I think when we talked about this last time, it was more about what about the student that keeps asking like irrelevant questions or dominates the discussion or won't participate. And we didn't see any of that in this video. We didn't see the students getting involved in that. So is that going to be another NA?
I think so.
Or would you like to rate him on responding to issues and challenges?
It'd be nice to have it there, so in case some outburst happens or something, but
Okay.
then they would be maybe a good call.
And any more comments on his preparation for evidence? Okay. The instructor communicated effectively with students. The most important behavior that you guys thought you should see when you go into a classroom is that information was communicated in a variety of ways.
I mean, it was visual and audio.
Was he acceptable on that, do you think? Not need improvement?
I agree with you that he was probably acceptable in the way he communicated, the fact that he had the PowerPoint, as well as lecturing to the class, but then we get down to the next option, use focus. Yeah, that would be the area that I would say he would need area of improvement.
Because on the one hand, he was easy to understand, but the focused and appropriate might be, and certainly maximizing attention and understanding. So you're okay with acceptable on the variety of communication, but the language for attention should be area of improvement. Facilitated discussion and interaction.
No, I haven't seen that.
Printed visual materials clear and legible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for the little we could see of the PowerPoint, it seemed fine. It seemed like it had the terms. It was. Is that an area of strength or acceptable?
I would say strength. It wasn't. I mean, it wasn't too much words on there. I think it was pretty narrowed down.
Any other comments or evidence about his communication?
A couple of times he had his back to the class when he was talking. I mean, sometimes you're gonna do that, I understand, but he did it a number of times.
Moving is good, but he like never stood still. So you were very distracted in general from his constant.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we did talk about last time was the nonverbals too. And granted, it's hard when you know you're being, when you're on video, you got to stay within the view of the camera. You can't maybe be as natural, but he did just walk back and forward and out and back and forth.
He did sort of walk into the class a little bit, which personalizes the instruction, I think.
I thought his pacing was okay. He didn't speak too fast or too slow.
He projected well.
Okay. Any other comments or evidence for that one? Okay, number 5 on the form, the instructor clarified the objectives for the students. The most important behavior that came out of the last session was objectives are identified in order to provide focus for the class.
I didn't really see that.
And it seems you didn't start with any like what the objective was other than saying budget. With one word objective.
Yeah. Even later on where he made the comment about he wanted them to know the concepts and not the computation, that's still, he's kind of hinting at the important aspects, and he mentioned this slide's important. But did you feel like what would you rate them on? Objectives are identified in order to provide focus for the class.
I go with accept.
Yeah.
It's acceptable because he said also that the budget is a plan of the future, and there are are going to do it step by step and compare what they have done last year. I mean, that's.
So you provided definitions. You referenced important information. So acceptable? Okay. This is one that we can't tell from here, but hopefully you guys will be able to tell when you're doing your observations. The syllabus is referenced and or followed.
I find that one redundant to the objective one, number one, like the lecture aligned with the syllabus. Syllabus is followed, isn't that kind of the same?
Yeah, that's true.
And followed, you can go ahead with it because sometimes you might need for a class more than you have projected. So then it's kind of pushing to other class or so what you were supposed to cover this class. It happens always. And
So-
that's why we write syllabus can be changed according to the wishes of the instructor.
I'm trying to remember what we talked about last time. I think we were talking about, during that discussion, making connections to, how it fit into the course, not the actual document, but I don't remember. It would be easier just to leave out that one because it's
Yeah.
already covered someplace else.
Yeah.
Objectives were reviewed at the middle or end to check understanding. I mean, we saw the middle. Did he ever check understanding? No, we didn't see the end. So maybe at the end he went back through and said, okay, you can tell me what this is. You can define that for me. What would you expect to see him to do? Like at some point in the class to demonstrate that behavior. Because even though we didn't see him do it, I do think it's an important part of that clarification element. How could he have clarified the objectives and reviewed the objectives?
Okay, I've been checking and asking questions to the students to review that content if they're understanding it.
Yeah, or even saying, does anybody not understand? It doesn't even have to be just a check for understanding. It doesn't have to be completely, fine-tuned, dedicated to a particular concept. Just say, everybody understand? Although the better way to say it is, does anybody not understand? Because they still may not raise their hand, but at least that way you know who's struggling. If you say, does everybody understand, and nobody raises their hand, you still don't know if they're really getting it or not. 6 is going to be difficult from his particular lesson that he taught. Students participated in activities as expected. The most important behavior you guys identified was students were meaningfully engaged in topics or activities designed to achieve the stated objectives.
They weren't engaged at all, I could see.
And on the one hand, this is a little bit hard because what do we mean by engagement? Certainly, they weren't causing problems. They were probably writing notes down. Is that participating in activities as expected? They weren't screaming and yelling and throwing things, and
Or maybe they were engaged in something else.
maybe they were engaged in something else. So we would say for students who are meaningfully engaged, is that an area of improvement or is that acceptable?
Improvement.
Okay. Students knew what to expect and were well prepared.
No idea.
There's really no evidence of it.
Well, if they were standard students, they weren't. They weren't prepared.
And they were
But you can't.
wandering in late. Students demonstrated appropriate behaviors aligned with class activities,
They were quiet.
as far as we could tell. Instructor interacted with students to create give and take.
No.
Well, he did that one time. I remember he's referring to a couple of students as examples to support one of his bullets on the screen. Brandon, who's a kid's name, and another name.
Is that interaction?
I think so. A little bit, not overwhelming, but you're making it a little personal when you highlight a student in the classroom. But I mean, there's probably more in that video, so we don't really know. But I'd give it acceptable at that point.
What does everybody else think? Acceptable, needs improvement?
I would put improvement, because even if he did it once, generally he didn't do it, and there just wasn't not much interaction.
But let's say what we have seen is only 15 minutes out of 1 hour class. He might is doing it in other parts of the class. We don't know.
Right. So we just got to go by what we did see.
There was no give and take, though. That part stays in the grade.
No, it
That's
was
the,
not.
where I think area of improvement.
I'm spreading it a little bit.
And sometimes give and take, it's not for every class or for every subject. But the idea also that must be taken into consideration.
Which is true that it might be just the nature of the topic for that day. But on the other hand, again, when we evaluate, we can only go by what we see. We can't assume like, oh, but your other lessons were probably different. We just go by what we actually can
But
see.
in this case, let's assume that we are observing a class where there is no give and take. We can't say that he or she are not doing the same, but different things in other classes. But we are judging something according to what we see, and we are generalizing it, which is not correct.
Do we want to put acceptable down or area of improvement? What do you guys think? Couple votes for each.
On the line between the two.
A little line.
Yeah, on that line right in the middle.
We're gonna put an X between. Anybody feel strongly one way or the other?
I
We got
would
one.
definitely give him improvement for that one. But
I mean, it is true in terms of when we say interacted with, if we stopped it just at interacted with students, then Ed makes a valid point. He did. He said stuff about particular students in that class. But if we're focusing on the create, give, and take, he did.
He did.
So do we want to adjust that item or?
Maybe I tried that.
I think you can leave it there. It's
just leave it and
yeah,
decide for yourself when you go to observe someone.
And that would be where you use your evidence.
How much give and take can you have with a budget discussion?
Well, that's a good question, but I definitely think it could have been more.
Well, maybe it would have been more if we'd seen the remaining 45 minutes. I don't know.
Do you think so, though? I don't
Well,
think so.
It's a dry subject.
Money doesn't have to be a dry subject. I'm interested in money because I have none.
Well, it's true too that some topics are more, amenable to like group work or discussion or debate than others. But even in the cases where he referenced like Brandon, instead of saying that's like Brandon's problem or Brandon's company or Sarah, I think was the other one. What could he have done instead though to get that student involved? Instead of just referencing them, what could he have done instead? Instead of just saying, Krishane's problem.
You could ask the student to talk about that.
Krishane, how does that relate to the proposal you submitted?
Right.
So throw it back on the student instead of telling the student how it relates. Say, remember this other, like I said, he kept referencing their businesses, so they must have had something going on where he could have said, how does it relate to what you decided? And what effect would this have on your business? And he didn't, he mentioned it, which is great. He knows their names, but he didn't allow them to make that connection. He told them the connection. Let's see, managed off-task behavior and unanticipated questions. That's got to be an NA in this one. Number 7, support materials were appropriately and effectively used. This is, I think, another area where an NA column obviously is going to be helpful. Appropriate and sufficient materials were utilized as needed to achieve objectives. That's the main thing that the committee felt was the most important behavior. How would you rate this gentleman?
That's appropriate. Like you said, it does sound like that they were working on a business, they may have had to do their own budgets, seems like it's reference to.
Okay. I mean, I don't know what other materials I can't think of anything he should have been using that I thought, why didn't he? I mean.
No, you could have given a copy of the PowerPoint out to class or some sort of handout supporting the lecture. I mean, I do that.
Or maybe he has given it already.
Yeah, maybe it's in my learning.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, if that's the course policy, print it out and bring it,
Yes.
then
Right.
maybe they've already done that.
And I send them emails also. Next test being chapter 2 handout.
So that they know exactly what they need to have. I mean, I think, well, I'll let you guys decide. For appropriate and sufficient materials that were used as needed, is that strength, acceptable, or improvement?
I'd go acceptable.
Okay. And then technology was used.
Yes.
He didn't seem to have any problem working his PowerPoint. Acceptable, area of strength?
Acceptable.
Yeah, mouse control.
Okay.
And were there any other comments, any additional comments that you guys saw that you would have liked to provide to this gentleman, or to remind yourself when you go to the post-conference? Anything that you would like?
I'd ask him, how does he know that the students picked up what he was putting out there? How did he assess their understanding?
I have seen here, right, on the board was the assignment for next class written for chapter 10.
Yeah, I wondered if that was his. I kind of assume it was his, or he would have erased it. Yeah.
Because I have seen it.
Any other comments that you would have had for this person?
Well, I did write a bunch of stuff down, but it's stuff we essentially covered. I mean, mostly the thing that irritated me were the tardy students. If he has that many tardy students wandering into his class, he's got a problem. So there, I would specifically mention that in the comments. Put the cup down.
Because that's a good point too. Instructor managed off-task behavior. We said that was not applicable, and it's not really off-task behavior, but every single student who came in walked right across the room, right in front of him. And maybe that's the only place they had to go, but there were multiple students who then, while he was lecturing, were walking around right in front of him while the rest of the class was looking at him. And he, like you said, that he didn't do anything about that.
You're always going to have the student who comes in late, but when you have the chronic student, student who's chronically late, then you've got an issue, I think. You're not in control of your classroom.
So you either need a policy for that, or you need a strategy for dealing with it.
Mine's in the syllabus.
Yeah.
So I would assume everybody would have some sort of suggestion on how they're going to handle it in the syllabus.
So, yeah, that definitely could be brought up at the post-conference. It seemed like there were several students who arrived late. Do you have a policy or for that in your syllabus? Is that something that, and it may be, as we're saying, maybe there was something else going on where that was the one day that 8 people showed up late, and it never happens in every other class. And then he could say, oh yeah, but there was a speaker in the class before that went over, and I knew they were going to be late. And then you could say, oh, okay. But that would be a question to ask, because it certainly didn't seem to be conducive to the learning environment to have students wandering in late.
As I mentioned earlier, from a positive note, I thought it was good when he came out from behind the podium and personalized his lecture somewhat by sort of entering further into the classroom.
You might want to minimize undermining his textbook. I think that whenever you're
that's a good
assigning a
one.
textbook, you probably shouldn't undermine the content. I think you can point out when the content isn't relative, or maybe qualify your anecdotal.
Especially when you're being observed.
And undermine your institution.
When you're being observed, it might be easy.
Yeah.
And that's a great, it's funny too, like, this was obviously planned. It wasn't a spur of the moment type thing, so.
We in the past used an art history textbook that was a bit dated in some of the theory that it was presenting. So I would give the students other readings. We would talk about why I thought that and we'd create discussion around it. So, you know, I think if the text is problematic, you could qualify it,
Right.
not just undermine it. So that, I guess that would be my suggestion.
Or yeah, supplemental materials, or just say, you know what, we're gonna skip this one chapter because it's really not relevant to today's business world, and here's an additional, or a different approach or a different interpretation of that topic that's more appropriate. Any other feedback for him?
Have this video pulled from YouTube.
You guys, all I did, and spend a few days trying to find some, because if you just Google community college teaching demo, oh my Lord, some of the stuff that comes up is interesting. So let's try and get one more done. So this is an intro to psych class. Well, again, it's a community college, so. So sorry, I would use another one of those notes templates to just jot some stuff down so that we can discuss it. job. So let's start thinking about a little bit different approach in this one. Let's see if we can quickly go through and get a committee-wide forum on this intro to psych lesson. So, number one, the objectives for the class were achieved. Again, we didn't see the end of the class, but the most important thing, the lectures aligned with the syllabus. You guys don't have the syllabus, but what can you probably assume?
She's fairly well structured, so I would assume she is following her syllabus.
Objectives were presented at the beginning and summarized at the end.
Yeah.
And we didn't see the end, but
Yeah.
a form of assessment was used.
Just asking questions.
So how would you rate her on these three?
Everything's starting. I mean, especially she went back and reviewed the last lesson also.
Strength for all three? Number two, the method of presentation was appropriate in meeting the objectives. The methods used engaged the students.
Engage the students. I mean, they have asked questions and they are responding to that.
Oh, she stopped getting answers in the end, so I was wondering if they were kind of zoning out. At the beginning, everybody's answering, and then at the end, she was having to give them.
Well, and what was the difference?
It was a review versus
Yeah.
material, so the students were not prepared for the class.
It definitely could be. But was she trying? Did her method engage students? Because I think we could get at whether students were prepared later on, maybe in student behaviors. But did her method engage students?
Now let's see in percentage. What is the percentage in average of students who are prepared for class?
Yeah.
In every class.
All of them.
That's why I mean this kind of a point is not relevant for the instructor himself. It's to the students. When you have good students, they prepare themselves. Otherwise, regardless what you do, you are not there.
That's exactly right.
That's the idea. And this point should not be a kind of evaluation of the instructor.
And I think we're just looking at effort. So like you said,
Even effort, everyone will say go ahead and do it. When they don't do it, you can't change it. You can't penalize them for that.
right, but you also don't have to, I think, condone it. So you could still continue to ask questions, and if they're not prepared, then you have evidence. But I guess my point is that doesn't mean you should stop asking questions just because students don't prepare.
You can ask questions, but in case they haven't done anything.
Right.
So then you have to go to the second step.
Right.
I'll stop and make them look at the answer.
Okay, she didn't use a lot of wait time.
That's
Now
right.
granted, you could stand there for 45 minutes and they still might not get the
Yeah.
answer, but that's a great alternative. Then, okay, well, does anybody have their textbook? Can you open up to page 25 and see what the definition is?
Or do you start implementing things like a warm-up of the materials they were supposed to have read? You know, something. So have accountability, there's no accountability.
So do we think that, what do we want to give around the method engage the students? Acceptable or strength? Acceptable? Anybody want to argue for? We're deleting students understand the material. A combination of strategies was used?
No.
She tried.
Well, what strategies did she use?
Just lecture. That's
In
all.
PowerPoint.
Lecture,
Well, PowerPoint, yeah.
PowerPoint?
She asked questions, so she was trying to get engagement.
She tried to show a video, but she couldn't get the electronics work.
That's the next one.
So, unlike with the last one where literally all he did was talk the entire time, and maybe it wasn't successful, and certainly it seemed like the students were not prepared for some parts of it, but she was making that effort to use lecture PowerPoint questioning. So what will we give her on a combination of strategies? Acceptable? Evidence of active learning exists. And this might be something that as a committee you might want to, unpack a little bit more, because does active learning have to mean like discussion and group work, or can it just be that students were doing they were taking notes, they were asking questions, they were offering information, answering questions, offering information. Based on what you saw here, was there active learning in your definition? Got a couple yeses? Got a no? Got a kinda?
You really know? I
They,
mean, the camera showed the student wasn't passed out on his desk. He was looking right at her. Okay, the ones you could see in the foreground.
It seemed like
So-
people were taking notes.
Yeah, so
They were
I would say that's
active.
active.
Okay. Do you want to give her acceptable on that, or area of strength?
I mean, there's not, any one of us has been in a class where kids start to zone out, pass out on you, okay? And then that's when I stop the class and everybody stand up and stretch or something like that, okay? But it's not me. It's the student. So they look lively, they look alive.
Better than average?
Unlike the last one.
So we're gonna put acceptable for that? Okay. Instructor was well prepared for the class session.
Yeah,
The instructor
sure.
demonstrates both expertise and a plan.
Yes.
So that's a strength.
Yes.
Adequate materials are provided.
Don't really know.
we don't know.
Yeah, that might be, again, that might be another one to unpack whether or not, I'll put an A on that one. We might want to define what materials are, or it just is probably simpler, just leave it as an NA check mark if there's nothing to distribute.
Well, and both ones we've watched so far, we've been unable to use that one. So are we thinking that that's not going to be usable in the classroom setting? Are we all going to struggle with that? Having just provided
It's only not usable from the video. We're actually in the classroom. He's distributing handouts of some sort.
And I think too, if you're in any kind of lab environment,
Yeah.
then that might be an issue too. Like, are there enough protractors, or are there enough, tables or whatever?
I think it's up.
Okay. Yeah, I really tried to find like an art or a lab one, but they were really more, there were some artistic ones, but it was more like a commercial where they would show themselves like molding some clay or doing a dance. And I'm like, that's not helpful. It's just more like self-promotion. So I unfortunately couldn't find a good classroom example of a lab activity or, a hands-on activity like that. Class session is well-paced, structured, and controlled. Is she strength or acceptable?
Yeah.
That's strength.
And demonstrated the ability to respond to issues and challenges.
Didn't really see anything.
Yeah, we don't know.
Well, I'm talking about now we didn't see any student challenges, but what challenges did we see?
She was a little, she can escape out of her PowerPoint and show her video and then come back to it.
She didn't have a dry erase marker.
Yeah, she didn't have a dry erase.
That's what she said.
So do we want to give her acceptable, need improvement? I mean, she did say, I'll come back to the video at the end when I got a chance to actually finagle with it, Google it again. But so she came up with something, but do you think it's an area, those flaws were enough to give her area of improvement, or is she still acceptable?
I think she's acceptable. Everybody has a glitch in the classroom.
And she didn't get flustered either. She didn't waste 45 minutes trying to get her PowerPoint video to show. 4, the instructor communicated effectively with students. The behavior information was communicated in a variety of ways.
Yeah, she was PowerPoint and she was on the screen.
She knew her students' names, which was good.
She communicated the information using don't know if I would say examples,
Sorry.
sort of a descriptive process that made sense.
So is she area of strength or acceptable for communicated in a variety of ways?
Strength.
Okay. Use focus, clear, and appropriate language to maximize attention and understanding. Facilitated discussion and interaction through verbal and nonverbal strategies.
There's really no
Yeah,
discussion,
we didn't really see discussion.
just recall questions.
I answered some questions.
So there was interaction, but does it rise to the level of a strength? Okay.
Acceptable.
Do you think, or do you think that that's something that needed to be improved? Because that's another question. I mean, do you expect that there be discussion where literally people are giving alternate viewpoints and arguing things out, or is it more a matter of there was that back and forth?
Do we have an NA column in this one?
Nope, but we can.
Yeah, I think we need it because not every class is going to have applicable discussion.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you say discussion, you really want it to be sort of either in groups or as a class, we're going to have a conversation rather than we're going to step out of that lecture environment. Okay. I'll put an NA for that one.
Or maybe even facilitated interaction, just leave the word discussion out.
And that's true too. You can make that edit. That might make it more clear what you're actually looking at. You want to say facilitated interaction through verbal and nonverbal? Okay. And how was she on just facilitating interaction?
It was acceptable. Try.
Yeah, I would have thought, and again, as a teacher education person, the idea of wait time is really important. That, or using alternative strategies like let's look it up, or flip back in your notes to last time, or do something to prompt them to generate information, rather than if nobody raises their hand right away, say, okay, I'll just tell you. So, I mean, there are things that you can do. Printed and visual materials were clear and legible. Strength, acceptable?
Acceptable. It's fairly busy for a PowerPoint.
Okay, everybody's okay with acceptable for that one? Instructor clarified the objectives for the students. The most important one, objectives are identified in order to provide focus for the class.
Yeah, I thought she did that at the beginning.
Yeah, she did emphasize what was important. I wrote down with it.
Yeah. Okay. Strength.
Yes.
Syllabus is referenced or followed. Again, I think we
got rid of that.
Yeah, I already did.
is that one of the ones that we did? Yep, okay, we got that one. Objectives were reviewed at middle or end to check understanding.
I think we made it that far.
Yeah, I mean, I probably after she got through Piaget's 4 stages, she probably could have stopped and said, okay, what's the first stage, what's the second, done something we didn't see it. So that is an A. And she also relatively frequently referred to the text. It talks about this in your text or in the chapter, that kind of thing. Number 6, students participated in activities as expected. Students were meaningfully engaged in topics or activities designed to achieve the stated objectives.
Acceptable.
Where they were doing what they should have been doing, given that their professor was lecturing and showing a PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Or acceptable or strength?
Acceptable.
Okay. Students knew what to expect and were well prepared.
I wouldn't say needs improvement on that one because that's the students do not seem prepared.
For the current content.
Yeah, I think.
Okay. And at the very least, again, there's always that, that shyness or that unwillingness to be the first person to raise your hand and act like, you're the know-it-all. but she didn't really do anything to, you know, pull information from them. She gave up on that pretty quickly. Students demonstrated appropriate behaviors.
As far as we can tell.
Instructor interacted with students to create give and take.
And she asked questions.
Is that acceptable? Is that strength?
The strengths you did fairly frequently,
Instructor managed off-task behavior and unanticipated questions.
I didn't see it.
Yeah, and one of the things that she was very good at was echoing the responses and enhancing them and saying, oh yeah, good, because, you know, and bringing in what they said and further developing it. So allowing them to participate, especially because the first guy who answered the schema question didn't really answer it right, but she kind of prompted him a little bit, and then he said a framework, and that was a better, you know, so she didn't just say no wrong. She said, well, okay, experiences, and then he said, well, a framework. And then she said, yeah, framework, good. Support materials were appropriately and effectively used. Appropriate and sufficient materials were utilized as needed to achieve objectives. She didn't have a huge amount of stuff, but it didn't, for her objectives, it wasn't necessary. Technology was used. Acceptable. And then were there any other comments that you guys had for
One thing
her?
I found distracting about is she kept pushing up her sleeves. So like her personal behaviors were distracting.
Yeah, you know, it's always funny, again, to get videotaped and to realize all the, you know, annoying things that you do that you don't really realize you're doing, and then you see it, you're like, know that.
One thing I wrote down was, even though she didn't pace around like the last guy did, she used hand gestures. So she showed some sort of movement, and you know, she wasn't just sitting there. She looked lively. So that was good.
And I like that she gave encouragement to the students, saying, oh, very good. That's good. Yeah. Just positive reinforcement.
Anything else for her?
She stayed on topic, unlike the last guy. She was easy to understand. She had good pacing.
Yeah, she gave, she also gave examples, but she gave the example and moved on and did then start talking about 4 more other things that were not as related. She said, peekaboo, that's the example for object permanence, you know, and she used her Coke can real quick, and then she moved on to the next stage, so she didn't get too caught up in that. The discussion of conservation with the glasses, that was, like you guys pointed out, where she really needed something, a whiteboard marker or something, so she could draw a diagram of it, because I thought that wasn't particularly clear. But again, she was giving specific examples to support the factual information from the slides. Any other additional comments for her? Okay, so one of the things that, and I don't know if, certainly I'm willing to come meet again, one of the things that, this may come out of your meeting that you're, no, that's for adjuncts, the meeting in Hughesville in a few weeks. Yeah. Okay, so that might not help. One of the things that you guys have on your form, though, that is the final official version of this, is you will have to determine how you're going to know if they met that, I think it's a 75% benchmark. I didn't bring that form with me.
Oh, okay, right.
So like that they performed at the level of 75% or better as a result of this observation. But that might be, I don't know, that's probably not mathematically
Well,
proper.
that part through Senate hasn't been.
Okay, so that's what you're still discussing? Okay, so at least in this, then you can at least eyeball this, and again, I'm sure it's not statistically significant or appropriate, but you could say, wow, of the like 18 elements, they got 6 areas of strength and 2 needs improvement. So you could use that as a way to kind of eyeball their performance, but then that's a further discussion that's kind of above and beyond what we're doing here today. But then this way, once you've filled out this form, if you choose to use it, then you have your evidence and you have, okay, these are the things I saw that you did well in each area. And then your additional comments could be those areas that you either want to reinforce or that you want to question on. So what I'm going to do is I wrote down what I could of your comments and of what the committee decided for each of the 2 lessons today. And then I'll type these up, make the edits that you suggested so that there are, versions of this that people can read over. They can watch the videos themselves and then look at what we decided on today. If we want to continue to revise this, or if you don't want to use this, Melanie and I can talk and see, maybe you want to try it out for the semester, and then you come back and say, no, it doesn't work at all, we don't like it, and we can go from there. Or if it needs to be tweaked, we can do that too. Yes?
I'm sure you've discussed this before, and I apologize, but the observe box, you're actually, the instructor gets to select what areas that you, as the reviewer, will observe?
I don't think that, I don't think so. Melanie, correct me if I'm wrong. I think that those are things that, and again, as a committee, you might want to adjust these expected behaviors. I think if there's something in particular that they want help with, that's where you would use it. But it doesn't mean you don't look at the other things. It just means like, I really need help with making sure that I'm assessing during class. Can you please focus on that?
I don't understand that column at all, really.
Right, I would get rid of that column and that would be part of the pre-conference.
So you just want it to be like a narrative part.
I think the rest of it works.
Okay.
Okay, but I just don't think that column works.
Okay, and that's fine.
That's me.
And on this sheet, I don't know if it's worth adding another code or not, but I would possibly add the code of the assessment.
Oh, okay.
Showing ways that they're assessing the students, but if not, it's no big deal because there's one there that says other.
Yeah, and I just use the codes from the form to try and keep them aligned. So where do we have assessment in?
On this single sheet of paper.
Yeah.
On the bottom here, there are 8 different.
But those codes come straight from the 8 elements on the form. That's where I got the codes from.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
So assessment, I think we put it in number 1.
Okay.
Whether it was achieved. So if you saw, that would be where you could indicate assessment. I didn't want to create more categories than you had to fill out on your final. I wasn't trying to make it harder for you to or insert my own interpretations.
That's fine.
So any other questions?
We're gonna rate you after you.
If she's on video, you can put it on YouTube.
Well, I'm gonna end it. So
You can fill out one of these for you.
good. So these will be, I guess I'll just email the final drafts to you, and then as a committee, if you feel like more training is necessary or this needs to be a focus, then just let me know. But hopefully it'll give you at least a starting point to kind of coalesce around some common practices.
I think we will try these 2 forms, the short version and the long version this semester, and then at the end, then we can of the semester to see how it worked.
Yeah, figure out what's
Let it have
useful.
a pilot run and see how it goes.
Okay.
Yeah, they're very helpful.
I think, my goal is that when you do have to fill out that official one, that the chair and everybody sees that you feel confident in doing that. So if these both or neither help, then we can certainly revisit. So, all right.